What the public doesn't know is that many bail agents find themselves in a role of a counselor. Often, they're guiding families on how to keep their loved ones detained. Too often, family members are terrified to post bail for someone they love, not just because of the cost, but because they fear what that person might do once they're free. I'm Tiffany, your host, True Crime Connections, and joining us today is Ken W. Good, bail attorney who works out of Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is something we don't talk about enough. How many families are really scared of their loved ones?
Oh, let me tell you, big issues that nobody's talking about with charitable bail funds, because by the time someone has been bonded out, a number of times they've run through their friends, they've run through their family members. And when they get to that point, we call them career criminals because they've burned their family enough, they've burned their friends enough that there's no one else that will bond them out. And then those are the people that the charitable bail funds are finding themselves bonding out. And those are career criminals. They need to be staying in jail. Their families are afraid of them for a reason.
Absolutely. The Rob Rayner case is a perfect example. Their son was very sick and he should have stayed in prison.
Yes. And, another example of that is the Ilias Rutska, the girl from Ukraine that was stabbed to death. Mr. Brown, who stabbed her, his mom said he should have been in jail. And she had taken him to a halfway house because he had gotten off his medications and he was no longer controllable. And so she even said he should, he was on bond at the time. She's like, he should have been in jail. I mean, I have a good example with my sister. My sister, when she had a car wreck in 1989 in October, she broke every bone in her face and she started a 30-year drug addiction to prescription drugs. And, as a poor attorney just graduating from law school, I tried like the dickens to get her arrested and held in jail so we could get her straightened out. And they would not hold her. And they wouldn't hold her back in 89. They certainly won't hold somebody now in 2026.
So where does the laws fail here, really? I mean, because you can't really hold people without a reason. So,
well, but the biggest problem is this bad bail reform, where we're just, the whole concept of bad bail reform is, well, people want to come to court. They want to resolve their criminal case, and we don't need bondsmen. We don't need my clients to do what they do. And I think during the pandemic, that was proven to be absolutely false. I mean, we even have data that the president cited in his executive order encouraging states to get rid of cashless bail. And that data is from Yolo County in California. And it compared two people, nonviolent offenses compared their releases. One was released on simple release, just their promise, and the other was released on a surety bond from the private industry. The person that was just simply released on their promise had a 200% greater chance that they would commit a new violent offense in the next 18 months compared to someone that was released on a private surety bond. And, what's the difference? Family involvement. When you have family standing up for you and saying, I still think you, Tiffany, you have value. You can turn this around. And what you're talking about is when they've burned those bridges, the family no longer wants to help them. They want them to stay in jail. We should be listening in that situation. But we're setting up bad bail reform where we just refuse to hold them. We're just going to release them. And that's just causing crime to increase.
I feel like people, obviously the jails, they get overcrowded and some people have to get out. But if anytime it's a violent offender, let someone out who just got caught with marijuana. They're not hurting people.
Well, but the problem they have is, that's the argument that the charitable bail funds have been making for years is low-level offenders are getting stuck in jail. But the problem is when they started posting bail for people, they discovered that their whole narrative of what they've been saying has been false for so many years. There's not any low-level first-time offenders stuck in jail, and the jails are full of very dangerous people right now because we've had this period of bad bail reform, which has sent a message that we're not going to hold anybody accountable. And so crime is increasing. When crime gets increasing, then, the more and more, there's more and more bad people. And those are the ones that are getting held in jail.
So if a family is going through this, what steps do they have to take?
Well, okay, so bail gets set. And once bail is set, then the family, if they want the person out of jail, they can contact a bondsman and pay a premium. The problem we have is like in New York and California and, for certain low-level offenses, like if you were arrested in Houston right now on a certain misdemeanors, you'd just be released. But, there's some violent offenses for that. Assault, first time assault is a misdemeanor. I consider that a violent offense. And so it depends on what the charge is. But if it's a serious charge, the person will stay in jail if no one posts bond for them. And if it's a violent offense, like in Texas, they've kind of gone the opposite direction of the rest of the country, and they've strengthened their criminal justice system. And so they've limited the use of these simple release mechanisms, which we call, in Texas, we call a personal bond. So you're not eligible for a personal bond for certain violent offenses, and there's a long list. And so in those situations, you'll either post a whole cash, the entire amount of the bond in cash, or you'll have to hire someone to post the bond for you, and you pay a premium. And if nobody in the family does that, you're going to stay in jail.
How does this work? Like people, they can still put up like mortgages and cars and all that still like collateral?
That's collateral with the bonding company. So, it depends on how large the bond is. If it's a small bond, if it's a $5,000 bond, you're going to pay $500 in premium generally, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on the circumstances. They're not going to require collateral. But if you've got a $200,000 bond, the premium on that's going to be $20,000, and they're going to require collateral because if you don't show up, the bonding company has guaranteed that amount to the courts. And so unless certain things happen, that money will be paid. And so, bonding companies are not in business to charge 10% premium and then lose 90%. And so they look for protections on risky bonds.
How many people actually have that much cash on hand, though, to be like, here you go?
Well, by and large, like in Texas, historically, they've not regulate what bondsmen charge. So they may charge a down payment and then have a payment plan. But, we've got a couple of counties that have decided they don't like that. They want the whole thing paid up front, or they don't want them out of jail. I disagree with that because I think that tends to crowd the jail even more. We should let the market regulate that. That's what we normally do. What I point out is when crime goes up because of soft on crime policies, the public will not abide that. It won't last long because the public demands public safety. But on the opposite end, if we're holding everybody in jail pre-trial, the public won't pay for that. So we've got to find a happy medium. And the middle ground, I think, is more use of the private surety bail system. And because they have the lowest failure to appear rate by far. And in the criminal world, if you miss court, your case has to be put on hold until you come back. They can't go forward without you. And so why are we using these experiments on release systems that have a 50, 60, 80% failure to appear rate?
Right. Anyone who knows they're facing a great deal of time is going to want to run. Who wants
if
to
they can, there's a lot of people that would like to run, but where are they going to run? They've been born in the United States. They've been raised in the States. Their whole family's here. But, we do have situations like that. But if you're new into the country, you could be deported just from having the charge. And so, what people don't realize right now, we're in this period of time where if you're arrested and you're not here legally and someone posts a bond for you, like the private surety bond system posts a bail for you, you will be turned over to ICE in a lot of places, and then you'll be deported. Well, the bonding company has guaranteed appearance. Well, they can't come to court after they're deported. And so that's a recipe for disaster for the bonding company because they've guaranteed appearance, but the person's then been deported. And so they're going to end up paying the full amount of the bond to the county.
Going to make them go bankrupt.
Well, the bondsmen are being very careful. I mean, but yeah, it causes a lot of stress. And, bail is not supposed to be a moneymaker for the county. It's to get people to go to court. And so there's a lot of case law on that. The purpose is to get people to go to court. So if they're deported and the county doesn't want them anymore, we shouldn't be penalizing the bail industry for that. We've got to find a solution for that, because if a family lies to us and they go get released to ICE, how do we get off that bond before they're deported? And that's causing problems. We had a proposed constitutional amendment in Texas on that, but it didn't pass, or didn't get out of the legislature, so it didn't go before the voters. So we still have that issue. So I think bondsmen are being very careful and verifying citizenship before they post bonds right now.
Well, isn't there paperwork that goes with, if ICE goes ahead and deports you, like saying, okay, well, this is where the person is. Clearly they can't come.
Well, but if they can't come, I mean, if that's true, but the bonding company guaranteed appearance for that court date. And so sure, they can't come. And that's the point I'm making. It's because of an intervening event that the bonding company has no control over, that the defendant can't come or did not come, but still the bonding company guaranteed appearance. And so they're still required to satisfy their guarantee in Texas until we've got to find a solution for that.
I mean, and that's going to be every state. We're all having issues with this kind of stuff. I'm in Florida and it's a hot mess here too.
But there are states that have statutes that say if they're deported, then, you cannot collect, on the bond because, it's a superseding event. And I think that's good law. And so we need to look at something like that.
Right. I wish sometimes when they make a law in one state, it went to all of them, because the laws are there for a reason. And
well, but
for the most part, they're really.
But the states by and large regulate crime. I mean, they're the ones that punish crime. And so we do have, groups that propose model statutes. And so we do have a lot of model statutes. I think the best example of that is when someone commits a crime, they issue a warrant, but then they flee to another state. And so it's a fugitive from justice warrant system. And so when you in Florida come to Texas and you commit your stop, you have a traffic stop, and they're like, oh, Tiffany has a warrant for a really, really bad felony out of Florida. Well, you get taken to the nearest jail, but we can't post bonds for you for a warrant out of Florida. We can only post bonds for you for warrants out of Texas. So you will get held, and they can give you what's called a fugitive of justice bond, which is only good for 90 days. And the purpose of that is to give the governor of Florida time to decide whether he's going to seek your extradition. And so he issues a governor's warrant. So during that 90 days, he issues a governor's warrant. So, okay, so now they want to extradite you. They'll bring you back to court and say, are you going to fight extradition? If you are, then they're just going to give you a regular bail bond, because it's really a habeas corpus proceeding, whether they're going to release you or whether they're going to require you to go back to Florida. And if you come back and say, hey, no, I'm not going to fight extradition, then it's over. You go back to custody and they just ship you to Florida. But they have a really good procedure for that. And that is a model statute that a lot of states have adopted.
Good. We need to all be on the same page.
Yes. We do. We really do, especially on the pretrial bail, what's good bail reform and what's bad bail reform, because we have certain urban areas where politics has overtaken what's good and what's bad policy. And, the activists are saying, we're going to do this no matter what. And we're not going to admit it's not working. And, we've seen the penalty and the punishment of that to public safety, especially in our urban areas in California, New York, Illinois is a really bad example, and, in other places.
Right. So say I'm a mom and my son attacks me, he goes to jail, and then he's able to get bond. What am I to do as a parent for my own safety?
How old is he?
Able to put...
In our example, how old is he?
Let's say 21.
Okay. I mean, I think if you said in Texas, if you said 16 or older, then I would say that part of your criminal case, you want to get a protective order that says he can't come back to the house. He can't be within this distance from you. And I'm not really, I mean, those are a necessary evil, but I don't know how much protection they give you, because if he decides to get out of jail and come home and beat the crap out of you and kill you, well, okay, he's violated the protective order, but you're still dead. And I think a lot of domestic violence survivors have lost faith in the criminal justice system, especially during this bad bail reform, especially during COVID, because the jails didn't want to hold anybody, and they still don't, so they just release them. And then we've had terrible, terrible examples, especially in Texas. We had an example in Houston where a gentleman was arrested for beating his wife, and he was released on a personal bond, just simple release on his promise. And then he went home and stabbed her 30-something times and killed her. And the reason why he stabbed her 30-something times is because she was pregnant, and he did not want any other man to help raise his child. And so her and the baby were both killed. And we've had bills proposed at the legislature in her honor because of how bad that was.
Right. And in those instances, I almost feel like the judges need to be held accountable. Like, he attacked her. Why are you allowing this?
You know, it used to be they would be held accountable at the ballot box, but now it's become so left versus right. And so we're overlooking that. And so I think we're coming back to a time where judges will be held accountable. But we're kind of committing the same cycle that we did in the 60s, where we were feeling safe, we were more forgiving on our criminal laws, and then crime went up. And then the two parties couldn't agree on how to address it. And so we had a backlash, and then we got Reagan elected in part because of crime and with his war on drugs. I think that's just repeated itself. I think one of the reasons why Trump was elected on Trump 2.0 was crime and immigration policy. It was a backlash of one party refusing to address those issues and even admit that there was a problem. And so now we addressing that. I'm not sure how long we need one more national election where one side loses because of their soft on crime policy. And when they do that, then that party will self-correct and become a law and order party like it has been historically. Both of our national parties have historically been soft law and order parties. And so we need one party to correct and get back to that. And so we need one more national election where they lose to get to that result, I believe.
We need to, because I think that's going to make them think about their choices just a little bit harder if you're going to be held accountable.
That's a great point. I mean, we have examples of that even in the court system where these soft on crime policies have increased crime. And, there was even a case, and I think it's Sanchez versus Alabama, where they lived under a preliminary injunction where they couldn't hold anybody because it was, a judge imposed these soft on crime policies on them. And the sheriff of that county said, I'm not going to settle. I'm appealing. And they went up on appeal, and 4 years later, they won. And so they came back went back to their old ways and have accountability. And they told people, if you don't do what you're told to do, you will go back to jail. And what do you know? 6 months later, crime started going down. I mean, we know what to do to fight crime. We just have people preventing not doing it in our urban areas, in our soft on crime people. The people proposing soft on crime policies, we know what to do it. I mean, Trump has proven that with crime, with what he did in D.C. and in other areas. And he's proven that, we know how to address the border overnight. We don't need new statutes. We just need somebody that's willing to follow the law that we already have.
I covered a case, I believe it was in California, where a guy went to prison for rape of 2 women and 1 attempt rape of a child. And he went in front of the parole board and told them, do not let me out. And they let him out early. He didn't even finish his whole sentence. Early, they let him out. And then he ended up murdering someone. He raped her and murdered her.
Well, California is such a bad situation right now because, years ago, there was a federal lawsuit where they were alleging that the prison system in California didn't have the medical facilities, the medical doctors, nurses, whatever, to provide proper medical care. And so they imposed a limit a cap on how many people they can have in their prison system. But the remedy did not require them to release people who were sick. It just was across the board releases. And, it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the minority or the dissenters in that case would be the majority today if that issue went up to them, because the makeup of the court has changed. But at the time, the dissenters said, when you release the equivalent of a brigade of criminals back into society, there is nothing you should expect except that crime will increase, and that everywhere this has been done or tried in the past, crime has gone up. And I would argue that's exactly what's happened. And because of their refusal to build additional capacity, that's a backdoor limit that requires bail reform, criminal justice reform, because they refuse to build additional capacity in their system.
Well, they need to beef up their reform, because I'm telling you what, a lot of people, they're repeat offenders. And for some of them, they prefer to be in jail because they're getting free meals, their clothes are washed, they can sleep all day. It's easier for them.
Well, but
so some people.
But the reform in California, when they say, "Oh, this will make us safer," it's a lie. It's only to decrease the prison and jail population. It's not for any other reason. And when they call the bill to make us safer, it's a lie. It's not. It's just to decrease the population of the prison or the jail. So, and that's it. It's not to make us safer. It's the opposite. And what they'll argue is, well, on a percentage basis, crime stayed the same because we released more criminals. What they're not telling you is, yeah, but crime went up 40% because of the amount of criminals they released into the population. But they're just playing the numbers game, and they're cooking the books to say, don't believe your eyes that crime is going up. Believe us when we say it's not.
Fake news.
Yeah. Well, and I wrote an article last October saying, here are all the reasons why we should not be believing the FBI statistics, because all the activists would say crime is not going up and you don't have to believe us. You can just look at the FBI statistics. And there's a whole host of reasons why those weren't correct. And so I wrote an article about it. Well, probably 10 days later, suddenly the FBI statistics had been updated, and they showed for the first time that crime was actually going up. And that's still incomplete because the data, they were switching over to a new system, and a lot of police departments were not reporting to the new system because they had to get new equipment. And so suddenly the activists couldn't argue right before the election that crime wasn't going up. And, so what happened is during the election, that's the moment when they started yelling, Trump is a fascist, Trump is Hitler, because they could no longer talk about crime.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad maybe they read your article and they're like, oh, shit.
No, yeah. I would like to say it was all me. It was because of me. But no, I was just the timing. I was just very, very lucky with the timing. But yeah, I'm sure Biden himself read my article and said, oh, my God, let's correct this. No, it was just lucky timing.
Especially because certain offenders, they don't change. The domestic violence, the sexual offenders, the rape, they don't change.
Well, there's a lot of studies that say crime is committed by and large by the same people. So we have this city within a city, this crime city that's committing about 60% of the crime or more. And so if we could just address them and hold them accountable and hold them, then we would be decreasing crime. But what our activist friends don't realize is there's also the gray area between the two cities, and that's full of people watching. And they're watching to see, is the crime city being held accountable today? And if they are, well, then I'm going to be a law and order citizen today. But if they're not being held accountable today, well, then I'm going to join the crime city today because they're not being held accountable. And so we can decrease crime by addressing the 60% or the people who are committing 60% of the crime. But also in doing that, the people that live in the gray area will be influenced to be law and order citizens. And that's what we're losing.
Right. So many criminals, after they get let go, like a slap on the wrist 3-4 times, they're like, I own this shit. You can't touch me.
That's a great way to say it. It's like, and what I say is, they see that as a green light to commit more crime because they're not being held accountable. And if they just don't come back to court, then their cases are put on hold. And if that happens enough, then their backlogs grow, and that puts pressure on courts to dismiss cases. And if you dismiss a case, a criminal sees that as a green light to commit more crime because there was no consequences. I mean, yeah.
Right. Serial killers. Oh my God, got away with it for like because it was always just, okay, go back out.
Well, generally in Texas, historically, if you commit murder or you're accused of murder, you're not going to be released from jail. You're going to be held pretrial, capital murder. But during COVID, Houston, which is Harris County, started releasing people, and they released some accused of murder on personal bonds. And then they would go and then commit another murder. And so I started arguing that in Harris County in Houston, Texas, you got one free murder before they'd hold you. Kind of like a dog. You got one free bite before you were considered dangerous. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. What's wrong with holding people who are accused of these very serious crimes like we have always done? Only in Houston are we turning day into night and saying that's good policy.
You're healed.
You're healed until you murder again.
So what advice do you have for people? Like, where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, I'm very hopeful because these soft on crime policies are not sustainable and the public will not stand for them. These soft on crime DAs have a short shelf life. I don't think any of them have lasted more than 2 elections. I mean, Gascon out in L.A. ran for a re-election a second time and got his butt kicked. I mean, it wasn't even pretty. He got beat by 20-something points. And by and large, when those DAs get replaced, they get replaced with law and order DAs. So there's a lot of hope that what is not going to continue. And so I think that's a good thing. The other thing is we've got to get politics. I mean, politics is always in the criminal justice system. It's, the legislature is political, but it's in a drastic amount right now. And we've got to get politics out as much as we can from the criminal justice system. Because right now the politics is so bad, the politicians won't admit when something's not working. I mean, you can look at the immigration because there's so much similarity between immigration and crime policy. So you've got one side of the political spectrum saying, oh, these people just want a new life. We should not kick them out of the country. And we're like, well, what about vicious criminals? People who've been convicted of vicious crimes in their home country. They won't respond to that argument. I mean, they just won't respond. And so we can't agree on just the basic facts. And, I do think it's going to be hard to find a compromise on criminal justice reform, bail reform, when one side of the debate won't even admit there's a problem. And so that means we have to find a solution without them, which is what happened in the 60s. That's how we got Reagan. And then they corrected and became a law and order policy again. Because if you look at Clinton was a law and order president. Obama was a law and order. I mean, the left is demonizing Homan, who is the immigration czar. Obama gave him awards for doing the same job. So why is it being demonized under one president and he received rewards on the other? It's because their focus groups say that this is the only or one of the only issues that they can use to try to take over the House in the election that's coming up. So it's just a focus group issue that they've identified with several others.
I agree. Get politics out of it. Like, y'all fuck enough shit up. Just out. Get out.
That's funny. You're too funny. Yes, I would agree that we need to get politicians out and we need to admit that when something's not working, we should be able to admit it's not working. That's the problem right now. We won't admit it. They won't admit it. We just need more time. We just need to throw more money at it. I mean, it looks like in Minnesota, when you throw more money at it, everybody's getting it, but where it needs to go.
Exactly. Someone's eating really good.
Yeah. Isn't that sad? I mean, and you think about, well, if Minnesota has that, $9 billion in fraud, then how much does California have? I mean, it's 10 times that, 100 times that, whatever. But how many other places do we have that? And it's really, really sad. And you know, it just proves that a lot of what we hear from Trump, even though it gets demonized, turns out to be true. I mean, the first time I heard that Venezuela was sending their criminals, they were emptying their jails and sending them to the United States, was during the election, and Trump said it. I tried to share a story on Facebook about it. It was immediately deleted. And I thought, well, that's a mistake. It just disappeared. So I shared it again, immediately deleted. And then after Trump said it, then suddenly the press was trying to disprove it. And they said, well, they're not taking over all the apartment complexes, just some, which they didn't realize made them sound stupid. And then now we take it as a fact that there are countries that emptied their prison system and sent those people to the United States, and we're getting them out of the country. And how many other things have we heard in this election, in the election cycle, and only because it was said by one candidate, it had to be not true, and it's turned out to be true.
Yeah. The problem is when politicians open their mouths, you never know if you should believe it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that is absolutely true. I mean, but you know, we're now in a situation where every Republican candidate for president from now on will be called worse than Trump, because the worst thing they can say is you're Trump. And so now every Republican, I'm just calling it right now. You wait, you can send me an email and say, Ken, you were right. But you're already seeing it with Vance. They're already setting him up saying he's worse than Trump. We can't have him president. He's worse than Trump. I mean, we're 3 years away from that election, and the left is already demonizing Vance in advance of the election. He's worse than Trump.
Propaganda.
Every candidate for president from now on the Republican side will be worse than Trump.
Can our legislators help with this kind of stuff?
Well, you know, historically, the parties have self-policed. You know, I heard one time that said that for a democracy to survive, it relied upon the consent of the losing party to govern. And if you think about it, since Trump won and Trump 2, the losing party has refused to consent to allow Trump to govern. The problems we're having are because the losers have refused to consent to be governed. And if we don't have that, and they spend all their time delegitimizing the election, and, you know, the other guy lied, he cheated, then it's hard to have a country that runs smoothly. So we need to go back to where we put country first. And I think by and large, you know, people can disagree with me, but I think the right does. I mean, Obama and Biden didn't have great trouble in getting their cabinet nominated or confirmed by the Senate. The right doesn't prevent the left from putting up candidates for the U.S. Supreme Court when, I mean, they may not vote on them if they can figure out a reason, but they don't, once they're there, they don't prevent them. That's not true on the other side. And so until we can get that party to self-govern a little bit, to moderate, we're going to be in this period of problem. And I think they will start self-moderating if they will lose another national election on crime, immigration policy, and they'll moderate then. They won't have any choice.
I hope we turn something around, because it ain't looking good in any state. I mean,
well, right now you have so much money. I mean, look at Texas. Texas has always been a conservative state. Even when the Democrats were in charge of Texas, it was a conservative state. But the problem is, right now, the Democrats on a statewide election usually lose by 13 points. And the reason why is because for you to run a campaign statewide in Texas, you have to raise a bunch of money. And to raise the money from the money people on the left, you have to say things. You have to say certain policies. And the problem is, once you say those things and you get the money, you've now disqualified yourself pretty much from being able to win the election in Texas, because Texas is a conservative state.
So many games you have to play.
Yeah, well, you know, used to the left had room in their party for conservatives. They don't anymore. And what they're finding now is they're having less room for people of all kinds. And so their party gets smaller and smaller. That's why they need this immigration issue. And, for a long time, I used to why are we having this immigration fight? Why are we doing this? Well, we found out now. If they can flood California with illegal aliens, they get larger representation. They get more members of the House assigned to California. So they get more power by bringing in illegal immigrants.
That's illegal insane. Aliens.
Yes, it's absolutely insane. But again, it's not going to last. It's now chasing the rest of their citizens out of the state, so they've started losing seats. And there's projections that in the next census, they may these states may lose enough seats where even if Kamala Harris had won the Rust Belt, she would, under the new census, if they're not careful, she'd have still lost, because that's what's coming under their current policies, because they're running off people. I mean, can you imagine? We have this big fence around California that says y'all can be crazy, but we're not. That's not sustainable. It's not sustainable.
And people are fleeing in buses from there. People who live there, they don't live there.
And they're trying to figure out ways to tax them when they leave. I mean, they need the money. And so it'll be interesting. But they're kind of in a box. If you think about it, the elected officials cannot agree that something's not working because the activists won't let them. If they were to agree, this is not working, we need to find another solution, well, the activists will put up somebody to run against them, they'll demonize them, and they'll be done. And they will be done, period. And so that's why you see a lot of situations where, the politicians can't agree something's not working because their political life they're being held hostage by the activists.
It's okay to admit defeat, people. It's okay. It makes you grow.
Yeah, it is. But, when you're a politician and you spend all your life just as a talking head, what can you do if the people who are giving you money suddenly say, I'm not giving you money anymore because you agree that something's not working that I don't agree with? Wow. I mean, our election reform that created the ability for people to give unlimited money to political action committees is the cause of a lot of this. So billionaires have untold say in our elections now because they're not giving money to the campaigns. They're giving it to these groups that then go in and support the campaign. They can't coordinate, but they coordinate. So, I mean, can you imagine? So Kamala was in the election for how many weeks and she got $2 billion and she lost? And you could argue whether she lost big or lost little. She lost. But, I mean, she was spending money hand over fist. And she ended up in debt after the election. I don't think that she's paid back now. And
oh, wow, I didn't know that.
And just think, so they gave her $2 billion and she lost. Is there any chance that they're going to give her $2 billion again to run a second time? No, there's no chance. I mean, she doesn't know it yet, but she's not running. She's not going to be the nominee again. The Democrat Party has a history of they usually do not select somebody who lost a second time. I mean, you have to go way, way back in history before they did that. Now, the Republicans, they're more likely to do that because it's your turn. I mean, Reagan lost to Ford, and then he came back and ran again and won. So I think, I mean, it looks like to me they're clearing the field for Newsom right now. And I don't think Newsom can win. So some people are saying that the eventual nominee is not anybody that's on the horizon right now, but we'll see. We'll see.
You never know.
Well, I'm really hoping that the candidate is going to be someone who's taken a stance on crime, because it needs to be someone on the left who's taken a strong stance on crime. And if they've taken these soft on crime policies, they'll lose. And so that's what we need, so that they'll lose and they'll start moderating. Newsom, he tries to sound like a moderate, but he will rule from the far left. So if you want crime to go down, he can't be the winner. But it doesn't have anything to do Democrat or Republican. He's just soft on crime.
Right. We've had enough of that.
We've had enough of the soft on crime. I mean, look at California. They elected Proposition 47, which changed certain felonies to misdemeanor, including crime under theft under $950. Then the soft on crime DA said, well, you know what? We're not going to prosecute that anymore. And so suddenly shoplifting goes sky high in LA and in our urban areas. Stores can't stay open because they can't withstand $25,000 a day in shoplifting. And then crime in the area goes up, and then drug use goes up, and then commercial property values start plummeting. They go to start selling for 30% to 50% of what they were selling for 5 years before. And so what happens? Well, the public can't stand that. And so they roll back Proposition 47. And the only reason why it wasn't a complete victory is the legislature in California is not funding the rollback. And so we're still having those problems because they won't fund what the people voted for. A backdoor soft on crime policy.
Yeah, it's just a mess. Big old mess.
Yeah.
Well, this has been very interesting. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I guess not. I appreciate you talking to me about all these issues today. And, we have so many, I guess I would just close with, we have signs where the public has had enough. And we've had examples, especially in New York, where members of the public have tried to come forward and help when someone's in distress. And the DA in New York has even prosecuted a couple of them criminally. And you could say, well, why would he do that? Well, he's trying to discourage further vigilantes from getting involved to stop crime. Because, as I said, the public only has limited time where they're going to put up with this, and they're going to demand public safety. And the first thing would be, he would call it vigilante justice, where people in the public are going to step in and stop things like this. And that's what's happened. And so they've tried to prosecute them to try to send the message to the public, do not try to stop this, do not get involved. But if if law enforcement isn't going to do that because of whatever policy, whatever's going on with the elected officials, the public is going to demand it. And so that's where we are. And I loved what happened in DC because crime has gone down so much in DC. And it just shows we know how to do it. All we have to do is let good cops be good cops. And the reason why that kind of hit me home is during Trump's first administration, my daughter was in college and she applied to be an intern at the White House. And she was accepted. And she was one of a bunch of interns, but she was one of three who was in the West Wing every day for a semester during Trump's first term. And so as a parent, with someone living in a kind of a dorm-like facility across the street from the United States Supreme Court, I mean, her safety was very much my biggest worry. I mean, when she told me she'd applied, I'm like, well, great, you'll never get it because, the odds. And then when she told me she got it, I was like, congratulations, you can't go.
You're grounded.
It's like, you cannot go because it's not safe. And I can't just get in my car and drive to Washington, D.C. from Texas when you need something. And so, I mean, we're very close. I'm like, you can't go. And of course she did. She had a great experience. She had a great time. But that's why it's like, Washington, D.C. was a safe place then. We can make it a safe place again. We know what to do. We can do that anywhere. We just have politicians tying the hands of people for political reasons. And
it's all about enforcement. You got to enforce it.
Got to have enforcement. You got to hold people accountable. And then once they're being held accountable, what do you know? Crime starts going down.
Sure, who knew?
Who knew? Well, and when 60% of the crime is being committed by a small group of people, wow. Who would have ever thought we need to address a small group of people?
Right. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for having me. If people want more information about my group, you can go to pbtx.com, which is the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, we have a blog where we highlight criminal justice stories that we think are important. But we also have our own podcast, which has a link on our menu, or you can just go to thebailpost.com. The Bail Post. And all we talk about is criminal justice issues. What works, what doesn't work.
I love that. I'll make sure I put the links in the show notes. So anyone who wants, it'll be right there ready for them. This is great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.